Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the University of Minnesota and to the 16th annual Pancake Poetry event. Yay. To those of you joining us online, welcome to you as well. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Lisa German, the University Librarian and Dean of Libraries. At the University Libraries, we celebrate National Poetry Month each year by hosting the annual Pancake Poetry event. This annual gathering began informally when librarian Marcia Pankake planned a special reading each year during National Poetry Month. After her retirement, we continued this tradition and named this series in her honor. So Marcia, I think you're online, so thank you so much. Some of our past presenters include Sun Young Shin, David Mura, Deborah Keenan, Margaret Hasse, Bao Fee, and our very own Jim Lenfesty, who is here today. Yeah. Dr. Gwen Nell Westerman, and many more. I would like to acknowledge both Malika Grant and Erin McBrien for their work that they do to support the literary arts here for the university libraries. Malika is the liaison librarian for African and African American studies, cultural studies and comparative literature, and English. Erin is the curator for the Upper Midwest Literary Archives. Today, we are celebrating bilingual poetry, and I am very pleased to introduce Roy Guzmán. Roy is a Honduran poet whose first collection, Catrachos, was published by Graywolf Press on May 5th, 2020. Oh my goodness. Raised in Miami, Florida, Roy is the recipient of a 2019 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. Just an excellent reason why the National Endowment for the Arts is important. In 2017, they were named a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellow. They are also the recipient of a 2017 Minnesota State Arts Board Initiative Grant. Their work has been included in the Best New Poets 2017 and Best of the Net in 2017 as well. Roy has also been the recipient of a Scribe for Human Rights Fellowship, focusing on issues affecting migrant farm workers in Minnesota, and has been chosen as Letras Latina Scholar and a Poetry Incubator participant and workshop leader. After the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, their poem, Restored Mural for Orlando, was turned into a chapbook with the help of poet and visual artist Dee Allen to raise funds for the victims. With poet Miguel Morales, Roy edited the anthology Pulse Pulso in remembrance of Orlando, published by Damaged Goods Press. Roy's research focus is on Central America. They hold degrees from the University of Minnesota, Dartmouth College, the University of Chicago, and the Honors College at Miami-Dade College. My cousin also went to Miami-Dade, so it has a special place in my heart. They live in Minneapolis, where they are pursuing a PhD in cultural studies, comparative studies in discourse and society at the University of Minnesota. Before we welcome Roy to the podium, I'd like to acknowledge the people upon whose lands we meet. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are never enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. Now, please join me in welcoming Roy G. Guzmán.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Lisa. And you're absolutely right about the NEA. We need to salvage as much money as we can for artists, creators. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. For those joining online, just because you don't see people up front does not mean that this is an empty space. It just means that we're in Minnesota, one, and that we're surrounded by academics, right? Scholars, poets, and whatnot. So they're very shy when it comes to getting up front. They saw me and they're just like, nope, we gotta go. So yes, again, thank you so much for joining us. I decided that I was going to write something, organize it, and then my printer decided to act up, and I'm like, oh gosh, now I have to really show that I'm a millennial by reading from my phone. But there are some poems that I've been able to translate for today into Spanish. And so I will tell you when those poems come up and we'll go from there. Um, Happy Poetry Month, everybody. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. And I want to thank the organizers of this event for the invitation and for being so understanding and patient while I finish up my dissertation this year. Thank you especially to Linnea Stangret, who sent me so many emails reminding me about things, and I'm just like, oh yeah, you're family now. Um, so many missed calls from my mother, right? Because I just couldn't get to the phone. One of my mentors, who's a professor here, Dr. Gabriela Spears Rico, um, a Chicana Purepecha poet and scholar, continues to inspire and remind me that when people see you as the complex, messy, busy human that you are, and are still excited to work with you, those people really understand the value of community and what each of us can contribute. So thank you again, Linnea. Thank you again also to Marcia. I love librarians. I was thinking so much about, I went down this whole memory lane just thinking about how do you properly think a librarian? And I'm just like, I guess you do this, right? You publish books, um, you try to support them, they support you. I keep telling authors that if they really want their books out there, you go to librarians, right? Librarians are what's up. Um, my book is turning 5 next month, and I can't thank Graywolf Press enough for the warmth and wisdom they share with me while bringing this book into the world. The book came out May 5th, and so it was right almost at the beginning of the pandemic shutdown, and I didn't get to do many of these events. I had a whole book tour that we had to postpone, and so yeah, there's a lot of people that I think are still they have not yet seen this book, they haven't met this book, and so I'm very excited because to me it reminds me that every year this book gets to be new, right? This book gets to be new in the eyes and the arms of writers out there, the people who need to read it as well. One of the things that so I wanted to start off by, first of all, saying that this is going to be fully bilingual. And so I will switch to Spanish, I will switch to Spanglish, right? It's bilingual, right? But I study and I write also in French. I studied Italian when I was in high school and also in college, so I can read it really well. And I also, because of my practice and my theory, I also do know a lot of German words, but I don't know how to speak German. But yeah, I can tell you what Hegel says, right, about spirit and about society and God and nation and whatnot. So yeah, buenas tardes a todos, a todes. Les quiero dar la bienvenida si hablan español aquí o si hablan español por el internet. Bienvenidos a todos. Feliz mes de la poesía. Gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde y gracias también a quienes nos están viendo en línea. No sé dónde está la cámara. La cámara está por allá. That's the camera, right? Oh, para allá. Ok, ok. Tengo que preguntarlo en español, en inglés no. In English, I have to sound professional. In Spanish, messy. So, sí. Gracias también a quienes nos están viendo en línea desde Minnesota y más allá. Quiero agradecer a las personas que organizaron este evento por la invitación y por su paciencia y comprensión mientras termino mi tesis este año. Gracias especialmente y lo puedo decir en español, la Naya, aunque ella se llama la Nea, se pronuncia la Nea en inglés, la Naya Stangret, una de mis mentoras, la doctora Gabriela Spears Rico, poeta y académica de México, ella es purépechá, me sigue inspirando y recordándome que cuando las personas te ven como el ser humano, complejo, desordenado y ocupado que eres, y aún así se emocionan por trabajar contigo, esas personas realmente entienden el valor de la comunidad y lo que cada uno de nosotros puede aportar. Gracias a Marcia Pankake, la organizadora de la serie, y como les estaba diciendo en inglés, mi libro va a cumplir 5 años ya el próximo mes, el 5 de mayo, y no tengo palabras suficientes para agradecerlos a Graywolf Press por la calidez, la sabiduría que que han compartido conmigo al dar vida a este libro. Como les dije en inglés a la audiencia, hoy voy a hablar en español, en inglés, en Spanglish. También hablo un poco de italiano, aunque mi francés es mejor y quizá se me sale una palabra en alemán. Bueno, all right, so let's start it. Let's get started. Coming here today, I was thinking about, because I haven't been thinking about this reading before today, right? I was thinking about bilingualism and the state of the world, right? The state of this country. There's so much animosity and there's so much fear, I would say, when it comes to this idea, this question of bilingualism. But one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is that we're already multilingual, right? We already speak through our bodies, right? We speak through song, we speak through words, we speak through silence. So this is very important to remind ourselves of. We're speaking always in more than one language. So even though it may not be official, right? Even though to think about body language seems to be too foreign, too queer, for some people, we're still multilingual, right? I remember the very first time, so the only time I've been to Paris. I never thought I'd travel to Paris. I thought, oh gosh, I'm learning this language, right? This French, and I'm never going to practice it in any location. And so I go to Paris, and one of the things that was so striking to me is to just get out of this museum, this art space that we were invited to, and to hear people speak French in so many different like tones and cadences and accents and musics, right? And I remember standing there and I'm just like, wow, we don't teach other languages like correctly in the United States. We teach everything with this sense of fear, this disciplinary thing. Oh, because you need to pronounce it one way or the other. I'm sorry, homie, right? Even if you don't know how to put together a sentence, but you know some words in Spanish, you are welcome to come and speak with us in Central America, right? You don't have to be perfect. And so that was one thing that it let me feel so free, right? It reminded me, right, that these are things that we created. We created languages, right? Our ancestors created languages to communicate. So in that spirit, right, this is the kind of reading that I want to bring in today. The first poem that I am going to read is, let me see if it's going to be in Spanish. And it's in Spanish because I think it's important to also be able to start with languages that are not our quote unquote native languages and just work our way into the space, right? Into the language, the cultures. This is a poem that it's the English version is on page 10 in the book. And it's called, let's see, it's called, I want to be right about this, Atonement in the Key of Padre. Expiación en la escala de mi padre. En una esquina, el vacío al que llaman mi padre. En todas las otras, sangre derramada. Mijo, ¿cómo se siente al estar parado de mi lado? Le extiendo una antorcha al hombre que sale arrastrándose de mis cuevas por las noches. Todos en mi familia se aguantan la respiración. Mi padre me observa cuando llevo puesto un vestido de lluvias de abril dentro de la cocina. Orquídeas negras. Se mete un trago de cerveza mientras esquiva mi mirada, envolviendo su brazo alrededor de mi cintura delicada, sus piernas abiertas como un regalado. Orquídeas negras brotan de mi boca cuando mi madre entra con su versión de las llaves de la casa. 3 voces mudas colgándose de la garganta del árbol de la vergüenza. Árbol de 1000 remordimientos. Mi padre significa hambre. Nada, le digo. Mi padre significa cuchillo de obsidiana. Nada. Mi madre siempre sabe cuál visitante escondo en mi bañera. Con escoba en mano, siempre está lista para barrer las cenizas de vuelta al fogón. Le miento a mi padre para poder vivir. So this is a poem that it's many of us, you know, we probably were not raised by our, I don't know what other way to call it, biological father. And so I was raised by a lot of women and by my grandfather. And this is a memory, an instance when I was, get this, I was 20 years old. I go back to Honduras for the very first time. And lo and behold, who shows up drunk but my biological father? Someone I hadn't seen since I was maybe about 6 or 7. And he just, you know, out of nowhere just sits me down. Everybody's grabbing their cervezas, there are beers, right? And so this guy, like, he's sitting there and he grabs me, right? And he's suddenly asking me, like, so how do you feel about being next to me, son? And I'm just like, how dare you, right? Like, how dare you ask me this? And I just, you know, it's like I saw the Matrix, right? That day, that moment, I just said nothing. I can't lie to you. Like, you lie to my mom, right? I can't lie to you. He is someone, so he left my mom when she was about 3 months pregnant. And so my aunt became my second mother. my grandfather became my father, basically, until my mom was able to marry my stepdad. My stepdad is Cuban, and he raised me as soon as I landed in Miami, which was I was around 9 and a half. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to share that a little bit. Um, I was gonna say, like, any questions? Any questions? As I was thinking about today's theme of bilingualism, I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of books, a couple authors that I really love. One of them is, of course, our former poet laureate, Juan Felipe Herrera. In particular, I love Notes on the Assemblage. Wonderful, wonderful book. Um, Dan Vera, Speaking Weedy Weedy, about his experiences being queer and also from Cuba. Leanne Rory-Pog's Stendarians, also a wonderful poet, thinking about Japanese migration. Alexandra Liton Regalado, her book Matria from El Salvador is wonderful. Another Salvadorian author, Christopher Loma Soto, their poems, their book Sad Girl Poems, and one of the I think one of the most influential poets to me, books to me, is Eduardo Corral's Slow Lightning. I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. Um, the next poem I am going to read is it comes from the book, and it's page 5. Um, and it's the second poem, right, that, or I guess first poem in the main section of the book. It's called Queerdactyl. And some of you may look at that and go like, what? What's happening here? I was reading a recent review of my book that talked about how there's something about language that I do for this particular poet, also a Latinx poet, who said that anything sort of goes, right? In my book, language goes in and out. And I want to say that that's probably half right, right? And then the other half is a lot of revision. I can't tell you how many drafts of some of these poems I have, right? Some in some occasions, like 50, 70 something versions of a single poem. It would take me years to rewrite, right, redraft these poems. I needed a way to re-enter the poem. Oops, well, I don't have the language yet. All right, let's go back, right? It's like, oh, it's the anniversary of drafting this poem, right? Let's go back in, let's see what we find. And I want to say that because what may seem like anything goes on the page, especially for a lot of poets, especially for those of us who really care about language and love language, we're talking about hours, days, months, years, right? And some of our most amazing poets in the past, I can name so many, have said, right, that poems are just abandoned, right? The poem can just go on forever. Um, so this poem in particular came out of a sense of trying to think about how do I render an experience about living in between worlds while also thinking about this creature. I happen to be down in at Victor's. This is one of the local restaurants. It's a Cuban restaurant here, although some Cubans have said it's not really authentic. And the fights they used to have before the pandemic about how authentic that cuisine was, I mean, it was delightful, right? As someone from Miami, raised, by a Cuban stepdad, it was wonderful. But this one day, this word sort of enters my mouth, my mind, and I just couldn't let go of the music, right? Um, After a couple days, I started to see imagery, right? I started to feel this return to my childhood where I grew up in Miami in the drag ball scene. Um, I was very young. I was part of, I was a minor. I was part of the very first group of people to ever have like a gay um, what was it? Not quinceañera, but prom, the first gay prom in Miami. And so sometimes, like, so yesterday I was TAing for a class that's the students have just watched Paris is Burning, the 1990 documentary, which is an incredible documentary about the drag ball scene in New York City, right? About brown, black folks. And I kept like thinking about how, like, when I thought to myself, I was part of the very first gay prom in Miami. I'm like, holy cow, I'm history. I just won the lotto, right? Like that is more significant, I think, than a lot of other things that I might do in my life. So either way, going back to the Queer Dactyl series, I couldn't let go of this creature. And then the creature multiplied itself. And so there were many queer dactyls. And then I started sort of numbering them at first. And then I got to drafts where I was like, there's no numbers in this space. It's all just taking place at the same time, right? Maybe in different dimensions. You name it. I don't know if I can have some water. Thank you. Um, so the whole premise is there are these queer dactyls, they're doing their thing, they're dancing, they're celebrating themselves and each other, and suddenly there's this asteroid just sort of wanting to break up the party, right? So this is how we start. Queer dactyl. We vogued in graveyards, headstones big as daddy's factory plant. Playboy magazines littered under the bathroom sink. Sour cream drip drops on our mustaches. No one knew whose mom had charred the tortillas. We scraped marmoleum floors with our heels. Geometry went defunct, went apparel, berserk, bull in jeans, torero. Our mothers near their lips to our dirty claws as we sway them in man's holy unshaven catastrophes. Prayers so lit, you think they went out to find a job. We no longer search for food on the ground or in the sky. New border by its shame, plunge our bodies into it, the way a father's hand might twist, tighten, rip a rosary. Have we ever told you what else we felt when the earth's doors betrayed authority? When wind unfurled wig, crystal beads, the sacrament in our hands? Had mercy shown up as mercy, we might have stopped the idealized throttle, picked our hips from the humid ground, fashioned ourselves a new savior. So the way that people think about these poems is they think that, well, so I did a lot of research, right, for these poems. One, because poets do a lot of research, right? We research just about everything the same way that prose writers do. And I was obsessed when I was when I had just gotten to the US. Um, I love the names of dinosaurs. I just, it's like I didn't know how to say, like, I don't know, refrigerator or kitchen. But it's like, oh my gosh, this platypus, right? Like, or this names of animals. So like this pterodactyl, this T-Rex. I was in love with this idea that names, that words could be invented, and they could also just give nods to old languages as well. And so a lot of this, what I do in this series, in the book, there's about 15 poems. There's actually more poems that were not published as part of the book. One of the things that I do which is something that a lot of us who are immigrant, right, who are Black, brown, queer women, right, what we do is we code switch, right? So there's a lot of code switching happening in these kinds of poems. I would dare say that my queer dactyl poems are probably more autobiographical than my other so-called autobiographical poems. But it's all code switching. You know, it's like, ha ha ha, like I'm gonna just put a little thing here, a little hint here to this one person, right, who might read this eventually, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, so that's one of the poems in the series. Another poem that I want to read today is Amor Eterno. And this is on page 34. First, I'm gonna read it in Spanish because I have y'all should have a printout of it. And then I am also gonna read the same poem in English. Amor Eterno, this is something that I write about in my book, is dedicated to Walter Orlando Troches, who was murdered in 2009. Activista hondureño, a Honduran activist, right, who was fighting for political and LGBTQIA plus rights. And yeah, and the title of the poem is something that, what I want to say is that it's something that I didn't know how to write a title for this poem. And so I decided to kind of like cheat. At first, I was like, how am I going to write how am I going to name this poem about someone I want to honor and call it Untitled? I was like, this seems a little disrespectful, right? Given the context that I know who the name, the name of this person. And so as I started thinking about how to give this, how to honor the dead, I was playing a lot of Juan Gabriel, Rocío Dúrcal. These are icons, right, in not just Latin American, Latinx, but also Spanish pop music. And I started just thinking about like their songs. And I started thinking about my grandmother. She loved this song. And I was like, what would my grandmother say about this child, about this boy who was murdered, right? And I was like, I can't say eternal love. I'm like, that sounds too much like endless love. And I'm like, no, that's Diana Ross. No, 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 we got to respect Diana, right? So in this poem, Amor Eterno, right, becomes the title of the poem, both in English and in Spanish. Amor Eterno. La pared gris y astillada a la que mirabas fijamente murmuraba, lucías tus moretones con dignidad, verbenas rodeaban tu abdomen, secuestrado por cuatro hombres que llevaban máscaras de la edad de sus propias caras, lograste escapar, pero te traicionaron. Los hombres de estas partes se desaparecen frecuentemente detrás de la fe, de la crueldad de un hermano. Se desaparecen en el tufo rancio de la tortura. 8 días después, te tirotearon mientras caminabas por el centro. Estuviste en la morgue por horas antes que la policía levantara el polvo debajo de tu sombra. Impunidad. A los 14 años contrajiste el virus. Los titulares dijeron que lo irónico es que el virus no te mató, sino las balas que se emergían por la noche como estrellas fugaces buscando refugio, sin techo y con un padre en el extranjero, ya que nuestros padres sueñan con perdernos. Pediste asilo, te asesinaron antes que te lo aprobaran. Dime, ¿cuántos de nuestros cuerpos se sacrificarán para que los cuerpos de nuestros seres puedan vivir? En todas las entrevistas, tu madre decía que no era su hijo biológico, pero a pesar de todo, sentía como si te hubiera llevado en su vientre, como a sus otros dos hijos. Donde yo nací, los cadáveres se dejan hinchar sobre las camillas, las cucarachas brotan del retoño de la justicia. Aquí ya terminamos, transmiten por la radio, retorciéndose como dioses desesperados. Si han aprendido algo sobre la noción de la crianza, es que una herida casi siempre es lo último que urge sanarse. So I will read the English version, and this is on page 14. Amor eterno. The gray chipped wall you stared at murmured. You wore your bruises with honor. Verbenas encircled your abdomen. Kidnapped by four men with masks as old as their faces, you escaped. They betrayed you. Men repeatedly disappear behind the faith of a brother's cruelty in the rancid smell of torture. 8 days later, shot as you walked downtown. In the morgue for hours before police lifted the dust from under your shadow. Impunity. At 14, you contracted the virus. The headline said the irony was that it didn't kill you, but that bullets at night emerge like shooting stars in need of shelter. Homeless with a father abroad because all our fathers dream of misplacing us. You asked for asylum, died before it was approved. How many brown bodies will give up their brown bodies so other brown bodies might live? In all the interviews, your mother said you were not her biological son, but felt though as if she had carried you in her belly just like her other two. Where we were born, corpses are left to bloat on examination tables. Roaches crawl from the blossom of justice. Our work here is done, they broadcast, squirming like gods in despair. If they've learned one thing about nurture, it's that a wound often is the last thing urging for healing. Um, the 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 ending of this poem for me, it's we talk about gift poems um among poets, right? These are poems that just sort of come to the page, and it's like you don't really have to do much except be, I guess, like the yeah, just deliver them, right? Deliver them to your readers. And this ending was a gift for me that I then didn't know how to write on the page. And then I didn't, and then once I had it on the page, I was like, what is going on here, right? This is why us poets get this bad rap about, like, oh, why don't you say what you want to say? And something that I tell people, and I don't know if it happens to you in your writing, is that my writing is way smarter than I am. I'm just I'm just grateful, right, to have been, sort of a disciple, right? Someone that brings that light, those words to the page. But my writing, I'm just trying to keep up. And I think about this idea, right? What does it mean that a wound often is the last thing urging for healing? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You healed the wound, right? Everybody's like, no, where's the wound? Where's the wound? We heal it. And then something that I returned to, right? And this is where I learned so much about poetry and the wisdom in poetry, is this idea, right? That what needs healing almost always isn't obvious, right? That as we're there surrounding this wound, right? That sometimes we need to look at one another, right? Away from the wound and actually think about what else here, right? Who else needs healing that isn't necessarily asking for healing, asking for understanding. And I'm saying this not as a way to sort of bookend, right, the interpretations of this poem, but to remind people, right, that what we're experiencing nowadays, right, and what people have experienced in times of trouble, right, in times of what feels like chaos, right, um, is sometimes not the thing that you really need to focus on, right? Sometimes you just need to tilt your perspective a little bit. Try to listen a little differently because the noise is the noise and the noise will always be there. But it's how you start listening, how you start accommodating yourself around that noise, around those images, that I think that you can really start understanding other people because you start developing a sense of yourself, listening to yourself, right? And so I'm someone that thinks, right, that crisis, right, isn't really the crisis, everything else around the crisis, right? We need to look somewhere else because someone's getting away. Someone's getting away with something while we're just focused on the crisis. This is something that I think is really important, especially when it comes to LGBTQIA plus rights, right? This child, this human, right? Died of HIV, like he had HIV, gets gunned down, right? And a lot of us, especially those of us who are queer, right? Trans LGBTQIA plus in the United States, in the Western world, we think, oh my gosh, gay marriage, everything's over, right? We think, oh my gosh, right? I've got a pill, right? I've got a pill, so therefore, screw everybody else, right? HIV/AIDS is still a crisis around the world and even in the United States, especially, right, as medications, as medicines are taken away from people who need them for survival, basic survival. And so to me, that's really important. The other thing that's important is when we think about gay, queer, right, LGBTQIA plus rights, that we remember that this is a global fight. This isn't a national fight, right? Screw this idea of a national fight. We all breathe air, right? We all drink water. We're all pooping, right? I write about feces in my dissertation, and my advisors, right? My co-advisors, they haven't read that yet, that part of the dissertation yet, but I write about insects in my work. I study insects. And to think, right, that here we are horrified by a roach, horrified by a thing that in fact is of nature, right? Is of this place, has been around much longer than we have. I look at these insects and I go, oh my God, ants. Oh my gosh, roaches. We still have yet to learn from y'all because you do know how to survive, right? But something that has that thinking about things like the things that are small, the things that look hideous, are thinking about is thinking about excrement and is thinking about, you know, how excrement literally brings back life, right? This is so important, right? It's really, really important that that I, as a poet, remind myself, right, especially when writing about someone who was gunned down so violently, and people in Latin America and Central America continue to die, right, to get shot violently, right? Is how am I in conversation with them even after they've been murdered? What have I yet to learn from these from these fighters, right? You can call them victims. They're survivors. They're fighters, right? Through us, they continue to speak. They continue to survive. So I wanted to mention that with this particular poem. How much more time do I have? Oh, we're good? Okay, all right. Um, so I'm gonna read one more poem, and this is from the book. This is Quinceañera on page 53. And this goes back to what does it mean to be a human, right? What does it mean to know that you're eating and someone needs food at the same time? Um, this is a poem that I started around, I would say, 2014. Went to an amazing poet for feedback. She looked at me and she said, actually, what you have to say about this story is more interesting than what's on the page. And I was just like, I could take that and then go, Catholic lash, self lash, right? Or I could learn from this and go, yes, I could be better. And I went back to this poem and I went back to this poem and I went back to this poem and I didn't understand what it needed me to do, how I needed to listen to it until about 3 years later. And this is about a quinceañera, a 15-year-old girl. She's trying to flee, and her family's trying to help her flee because she's been targeted by maras, by gangs in Central America. And what happens is that they're trying to get her out. They think that they've succeeded, and of course, they catch her and they murder her. And I decided that I was going to write this poem from her perspective, a persona poem. And this is a question that, and this is something that continues to haunt all of us, not just in fiction, right? But in creative nonfiction. What does it mean to speak from the beyond? What right do we have? And so this is something that I tried to render on the page. Quinceañeras, para todas. For all of them, because there have been so many 15-year-old girls since this happened who have been killed in similar circumstances. After they dropped their machetes on a christened orchard, my head rolled like a deflated ball de football, and I mouthed the piss-soaked muck, the blood that stung my prude reputation, leaving a riverbank of useless clues under my fingernails, leaf limbs, distressed dirt. My age match another shallow grave. Not the musky vestiary they threw me in, which they kept pressing over and over with their shovels as a sign that had they suspected, they would have hanged my assailants by the balls. I know balls now. The rakers labored for hours. Girls gossiped in their navy uniform skirts on their way home from La Prepa. Boys eulogized their fathers tilling my corpse. A neighborhood crush found my fly buzzing crown, a chunk of torso, expendable limbs. Toddlers pretended to dig the ground like little chihuahuas swimming in solid water. When you go missing inside these untransferable shrubs, they make you skip the morgue. Abuela's albatross. Your mother forgets how to howl in her own body. Your father calls for dinner with the tone of a hot stove. Later, I took a gander at the wall of tears where they place skeleton flowers, where they post our naive portraitures. I come back extracted, half ripped and naked, my lips kissing my own belly inside a black garbage bag, a trick a teenager can only dream of performing in front of her future absentees. What talents are we brown girls missing out on before we can headline Broadway musicals, penned by lyricists familiarized with the weeded notes of ditches? Appear in the front pages of American daily news, grace a constellation of highway ads in the arms of a heavily trafficked boulevard. Muster men to stare at us from their automobiles as they drive to their sizable suburban homes where they'll kiss their daughters goodnight, laboring over their curly shampooed hairs, the letters of their names framed in golden ostentation over their beds, their fathers' whispers retreating their lips, knowing when to drift home, while I'm stuck demonstrating how frontiers eat the body like small gazelles in an empty shopping mall. Even I, a remorse, can afford to walk into. Um, so the yeah, this is it's really hard to to be a poet, and when you're writing about the state of the world, the things around you, because there's so much stuff happening out there that that is inspiring, but also that's just filled with angst and death, right? Especially those of us. This is what I find so ironic, that those of us who teach or who study ethnic studies, right? We're in these programs, cultural studies, ethnic studies. Um, these departments either disappear, right? Or they are never founded. And yet the labor that it takes to be an ethnic studies scholar, right? And a witness of that, it's so much work that you take home with you. It's like social work, right? It's human rights work. It's like being a legal assistant work, right? All at the same time that you're trying to keep up with the scholarship, right? With the new thing, with another way of just producing similar violences that we've seen before. It's just, it just has a new name now, right? It's a lot of work, and so I hope that with my reading today, um, I've been able to capture sort of what we do as poets, as community workers, activists, right? People who we care about the people around us, right? Um, we care about the people who are not here. We care about the people who have yet to come. This is one of the poems that's part of the Queer Dactyl series. And I'll end with this poem. It's really hot in here just because I feel like I'm wearing this. And so you might see me like, sweat and whatnot. And I guess that's part of the whole thing, the whole performance. But this is in Spanish. This is the poem on page, let me see. This is on page 8. And I decided to translate this, and I was like, oh my goodness, right? I did a BA in translation work. So that's where I get some of my experience, but I don't work on this all the time. So it's really difficult sometimes to translate like slang, right? And words that feel so specific to different neighborhoods and cultures. So, Puirodáctile. No tienes que verme batir mis alas de un lado para el otro para contar la cifra de llamas que he extinguido. Yo solita. Chica, no empieces. Alza, mete, saca. No te quiebres las uñas en ese hornito putillo. Saca, mete y alza, menea ese pico, tome ese billete. Eso, mamona. Este majeroide se quería meter por acá como un machista meticheroide, encendido de manera políticamente correcta. Pero yo como que, no, 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 no. No puedes andar predicando que las brasas se lavan más fácil que la escarcha, y menos si quieres achicharrar nuestros camisones camuflados con tu complejo de pija silicia, detonándote en cada playa donde nos asoleamos, como si jugaras a la ruleta rusa con un frasco de Viagra. Me solían llamar Chiqui por mis pequeñas extremidades, pero tampoco soy chupapollas o chupapatos. No confundan mi cabeceo o mis labios alargados por ser sumiso o por querer ser parte de la extinción masiva de un papito con truquitos. Levante esa cola, menea esa horca, menea esa cola, ahora pa'l piso. Nuestra mamita queridáctila solía decir que cuando haces tratos con mandíbulas asesinas más grandes que las tuyas, deberías de multiplicar tu suerte cerca de un volcán activo. Olfatea sus humos, trágate la cría de tu enemigo en un solo bocado. Escoge primero los de cuellilargos. La intolerancia afirmará su inocencia aun cuando esté calcinando nuestros refugios. Velocirá pendejo, tirano estúpido, tú no eres exquisito como yo, estúpido. Al diablo con esos majeroides que filman Triásico por paga. El voyeur siempre se perderá la libertad de un atardecer rojo. Ahora cáete al piso, horquíllate, chilla con tu pareja. Perfecto, perra, 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 perra. No les enseñes dónde escondes el resto de tus colmillos, hermana. O que prefieres esos lugares de excavación donde se aceptan fósiles y se puede meter un arco iris entero. ¿Y qué si tengo pignofibras en mi espalda? Llámame cachorro, llámame oso, pero no rugiré como una Dino Katy Perry. Dale, te dije, dale. Ahora, sachet, majeroide todavía está flotando en el cielo, reina del closet, polvo de ángel. En este bol que está pero bien candela, el odio no cruzará nuestra capa de ozono. Y mientras la tierra siga siendo una nena hambrienta, no habrá pulsión de muerte. No pereceremos. Nuestras almas escamosas pueden sobrevivir en campos de magma. ¿No lo sabían? Zorras tontas, zorras que ni siquiera están invitadas a nuestra fiesta. Zorras. Nadie se irá de esta fiesta sin dejar una huella. Fénixes, fénix en una pista de baile, sacudiéndose frente al rostro de lo perdido. Thank you so much. Yes.
So thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Roy. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
For those online, I hope you have a good evening. And for all of you here in person, please join us for some refreshments in the area right outside, in the atrium. And Roy's books are available for purchase, courtesy of the university bookstores, and they will be available for signing. So thanks again, everyone. It's been great to see you all here. Please come join us all. Thank you.